Anansi is a pretty well-known god, all things considered. He originates with the Asante people in modern-day Ghana, and a lot of his folktales were carried to the New World through, well, the same way a lot of people from West Africa were. Anansi's a trickster spirit, a small, fragile spider who habitually thwarts vastly more powerful enemies and accomplishes great feats through cunning alone, no strength required. His motivations are almost always selfish, and he's pretty morally neutral, but everyone loves an underdog, and considering the circumstances of the people who brought his stories over, it's not too surprising that his theme of a disadvantaged hero surviving and overcoming powerful enemies got so popular. His certainly weren't the only African folktales that came to the New World, but they were the majority of the ones that really stuck. Anansi has a lot of folktales, usually involving him messing with people and skillfully evading the consequences, but one of the first things Anansi is credited with is actually pretty meta. So this is the story of how Anansi became the god of stories. So Anansi is bored, and figures out the reason why he's bored is that there aren't any stories, at least no accessible ones. See, the sky god Nyame is the god of stories, but he's hoarding them like a jerk, so Anansi has no access to free entertainment. Anansi decides this will not stand, and goes to Nyame to ask for ownership of all the world's stories so he can distribute them more freely. Or maybe just keep them all to himself, he hasn't decided yet. So Nyame is willing to give him the stories, but in exchange, Anansi has to do 4 things for him. He has to capture and bring him the 4 most dangerous and or elusive creatures: the Umboro hornets, Onini the giant python, Osebo the leopard, and Moatia the invisible fairy. Anansi accepts the challenge and charges off to start catching them all. To start with, Anansi grabs 2 gourds, fills one with water, and dumps it all over the hornet's nest. Then he starts yelling about how it's raining and they'd better get to safety if they don't want to get drowned. The hornets make a beeline for the empty gourd, and Anansi plugs it and takes it back to Nyame. Next up is Onini the python. For this, Anansi cuts down a long palm branch and starts pacing around Onini's house, muttering to himself. Onini's like, what's going on over here? And Anansi's like, well, see, I was arguing with my wife earlier. She says you're shorter than this branch. And I was like, no, he's totally longer, but now I'm not convinced. And Onini's like, hell no, we're settling this right now. So Onini lays down by the branch, and Anansi's like, no, you still look a little short. Every time you move your head up, your tail like slips past the end of the stick. Tell you what, how about I tie you to the stick so we can know for sure? And Onini's like, that sounds like a great plan. So Anansi webs him to the branch and carries him back to Nyame. For Osebo the leopard, Anansi digs a big hole and covers it with sticks and leaves, which sounds incredibly tropey and obvious until you remember Nyame has a monopoly on stories and the tropes thereof, and therefore Osebo is highly unlikely to be familiar with even the obvious classics. So Osebo falls in the hole. Anansi comes over like, need a hand, buddy? And ties down a nearby willow tree, then spins a rope and attaches it to the treetop. He lowers the web into the hole, and when Osebo ties it to his tail, Anansi cuts the webs holding the willow tree down so the whole thing springs back upright. Osebo gets all tangled up in the web, and Anansi carries him up to Nyame. For the last task, Anansi carves a little puppet dude out of wood and covers it in gum. Then he makes this sweet yam paste, puts it in a little dish, and puts it in the puppet dude's lap. Then he webs up the puppet and waits. Soon enough, Moatia pops up, lured in by the yam paste, and asks the puppet if she can have some. Anansi bobs the puppet's head a little bit, so Moatia digs in. When she's done, she's like,
thanks, little dude. I said thanks, asshole.
And punches it. This gets her hand stuck. Her next brilliant idea is to kick it. This gets her foot stuck. So after thoroughly tar-babying herself, Moatia is well and truly stuck, and Anansi takes the whole mess back up to Nyame and claims all the world's stories for his own. When I went out this morning, spin, spider, spin, just as the day was dawning, spin, spider, spin, I saw a tiny spider his pretty web begin. I saw him swing from a silver string, spin, spider, spin. When I came home this evening, spin, spider, spin, just as the sun was leaving, spin, spider, spin, I saw the tiny spider, his pretty web all done. I saw him swing from a silver string before the setting sun.